What if you could tell everything you needed to know about a character from a single scene? This is One Marvelous Scene.
Ladies and gentlemen, for far too long, this country has had to place its brave men and women in harm's way. Well, today, my friends, the press is faced with quite a different problem. They are about to run out of ink. Get that.
Who are you really, and what were you before? What did you do, and what did you think, huh?
We said no questions.
While Rick's questions may seem prying, they get at the heart of one of the most pressing anxieties a person can face. Who are you? This is the central question that everyone struggles with for the first quarter century of their life, and for some, way beyond that. And it's also the fuel that makes Marvel's characters so compelling over the course of 22 movies. It's Captain America's returning not as a mascot but as a soldier. It's Thor's realizing that sacrifice is more valuable than violence. It's Iron Man's... well...
I am Iron Man.
yeah, that one's a bit on the nose.
By the way, I didn't mean to spring this
Thank
on
you very much.
Green is not your best color.
Anthony.
Justin Hammer is a man with a problem. He's quite wealthy. He's reasonably good looking. He's fairly intelligent. He's a solid businessman. And all of those things are a problem for Justin Hammer because he's not Tony Stark.
Doing a big spread on me for Vanity Fair. I
I
thought
am.
I'd throw her a bone, you know.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Well, she did quite a spread on Tony last year.
And she wrote a story as well.
It was very...
In 1987, Edward Higgins developed a theory that sought to explain the cognitive dissonance one feels when who they think they are doesn't quite match up with who they think they should be. This theoretical model to explain problems in self-esteem is known as Self-Discrepancy Theory. According to Higgins, a person will feel emotional strife and psychological turmoil as long as this internal disagreement between self-concept and desired self is present. And this is where Marvel's most compelling heroes and villains are formed.
What am I?
You're my son.
When a person's sense of who they are is suddenly in question, they experience confusion and sometimes intense dysphoria.
What more than that?
And they can go to great lengths to prove their perceived identity was the right one all along.
And your death came by the son of Odin.
Higgins thought that there were three selves, three different versions of you that work together to form your sense of self-esteem. The first one is your actual self. This is the collection of beliefs about who you are. I'm an athlete, I'm a nerd, I'm a rebel, I'm Molly Ringwald. Most of these beliefs evolve because you start to look around at other people and compare yourself. I'm smart becomes, I'm smarter than him, but I'm not as smart as her. And that becomes a devastating problem when the comparison you make is unrealistic. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The actual self is just a starting point, a baseline. The second version of you is your ideal self. Your ideal self is the closest version to a perfect you that there is. It's the person you hope to develop into, or other people hope you develop into. You can probably already see the problem that can crop up when there's a wide chasm between your actual self and your ideal self. The wider the gap here, the lower your self-esteem. And if your actual self is significantly different than what other people tell you your ideal self should be, well then you start to feel a sense of rejection and shame. The third piece of this is your ought self, the self that one imagines others think they have an obligation to achieve. This is typically associated with expectations of moral and ethical duty, so it's not really relevant to us here. So what can you do if you have a wide gap like this, twisting at your soul, affecting your self-esteem, and causing an existential sense of dread? Well, you have two options, and they should be obvious for visual learners. You can change your perception of the ideal self and set it closer to your actual self. This involves changing your goals, setting more realistic and healthy expectations, and being real about what you're really capable of at this point in your life. Of course, in a society where kids are pressured to be the best athlete, the smartest student, the cutest toddler, and the most well-behaved child in school, it can be incredibly difficult to just be. And that brings us to our second option. You can try to change your actual self to be closer to your ideal self. That means you eat better and exercise, and you be the you that you are minus 10 pounds. You enroll in community college, get that associate's degree, and become the college graduate your family wanted you to be. You break a Russian convict out of prison in order to build a highly technical suit of armor that will allow you to live out your dream of being the man that you and everyone else compares you to. Hey, it's not your fault he's obsessed with his bird.
I want my bird.
Well, okay, nothing's impossible. Are we talking about, is this a bird back in Russia?
All this is why I think Justin Hammer is a highly underrated villain in the MCU. If Obadiah Stane represents greed, Abomination represents wrath, the Red Skull represents lust, and Loki represents pride and later gluttony, then Justin Hammer represents envy. Like Marvel's best villains, he's not a bad guy. He's just clouded by jealousy he can't overcome on his own, and rather than adjust his own expectations of who he is and what he's capable of, he tries desperately to be someone he's not. And therein lay his downfall. Not in his stars, but in himself. Hey kings, queens, and in-betweens, thank you for checking out the video. Special thanks to Nando V Movies for coming up with such a great concept. You should check out his channel if you haven't already. You should support him on Patreon. You should support me on Patreon. If you'd like to see more of this, or hear more of this more accurately, check out the Deconstruction Workers podcast, link in the description. And if you happen to be in the Denver area, May 31st through June 2nd, check me out at Denver Pop Culture Con, where we'll be talking about Captain Marvel. Until then, be excellent to each other.